How should artists price their work? Should we share our experimental stuff or keep it to ourselves? What mediums are left to be explored? How do I start an abstract sculpture? What do I do if I just don't have the motivation to work consistently? Ty, these questions and more will be addressed in today's episode of Just Make Art. This is part 2. Let's just do this. Let's just not even call it parts because we've agreed we're just going to kind of keep doing this, going forward.
Yeah.
But this is our second crack at Q&A. We got so many questions the first time around that we had enough left over for a second episode. So let's get into some of these questions and take our best crack at some useful answers. So let's go ahead and begin with William Underwood. William says, I'll ask the question nobody wants to. How should artists approach pricing their work? I know there's no linear or right answer here, but would love to hear the two of you have a dialogue about this subject. Thanks for producing this podcast. Incredibly insightful. Thank you for listening, William. Ty, go ahead.
Oh boy, Nathan.
I made some stuff. I'd like to sell it. The
question of all questions, right? How do I price my freaking art? I mean, gosh, this is one of the absolute most difficult things for an artist to not learn, but figure out. I mean, there are so many things. I mean, you just go on and search online how to price artwork, right? That's usually the first step. How do I do this? And there's a million different answers out there. There's the pricing calculators, the per square foot, per centimeter, per meter, add in my supplies and the time worked. Like there's so many different things that are out there. And we usually learn the hard way because sometimes artists overprice their work in the beginning or undervalue the work in the beginning or have such an inconsistency in pricing, because one thing that artists do when we start out is we overprice the work we really love because we kind of don't want to sell it sometimes, or we think there's more worth to the piece we really love. And then everything else is underpriced. And so, when you present that to somebody or to a gallerist or to a curator and they kind of look at it and go, they're all over the place, it kind of throws up red flags. So I have been pricing my work per square foot for years based on a per square foot with a dollar amount. And then that equals the total of the price. I've done that for years, but it wasn't just a random thing. It was through a lot of market research and having sold work at prices. And how I kind of came up with that with a group of artist friends is we looked at other artists that were like us and we kind of priced their work based on theirs. So if I went and let's say, Nathan, you and I started out at the same time and you got into some galleries and you had some things going and you had your work was selling at this price and our work is similar and in the same vein, I would look at your price and go, my CV doesn't reflect yours. I don't have that many shows. I don't have a lot of things out there in the art world. I'm not selling in a ton of art. So I can't price my work just like yours. So I have to find another way to lower that work in a way that I can start selling work, number one, because the price of our work depends on a market demand. How much is our work selling? Is it selling at a certain given price at a regular basis, month after month or year after year? Well, then, okay, I can raise those prices a little bit. If your work is selling at a certain price, then that's kind of what the market believes your work to be worth in that moment. And so there are times where you kind of need to stay with that for a while, even if it's at a lower price point, because your work is selling. And that's what you need to do in the beginning is sell work and move work. But if you're constantly selling at a certain price, that's the market telling you it's time for you to raise your prices and take them a little bit higher. With that, though, we have to be absolutely confident and absolutely have conviction behind our prices, because people will ask, why do you price it this way? Why is your work priced this way? Because art is expensive. Even if it's a lower price, art is still expensive. It's not a normal purchase for people, right? To just go out and spend $750 or $1,500 or $4,000 on a work of art, right? Those are things that are typically used for your regular bills and things. So we have to have this confidence and conviction behind our prices. And if the market is telling us that the work is selling really well, let's keep that going for a little bit. And then eventually we can raise those prices because of the market demand.
All right, so I'm going to stop you there. Is it as simple as supply and demand? Is it as simple as what the market bears? And here's why I ask, is because I have read somewhere, who knows where, But I have heard somewhere out in the ether that it could also be a product of not having yet found your audience. In other words, if not the wrong people, if not yet the right people are the ones who are even looking at your work or considering buying it, it wouldn't matter if it's $10,000 or $10. They're not your people. That's not your audience. That's not your, market.
Right. Well, let's look
That
at it
question
on an
make
art.
sense?
Yeah, let's look at it in an art timeline, right? From beginning, you're starting out, right? You just started. You've got 10 or 15 paintings or sculptures or whatever it may be that you're making that you feel really confident behind.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's time. Now, what do I do?
Yeah.
You have to put a price on it. You can't just sit there with it. So you're going to price it a little low, but you got to kind of look at other people that are in that same stage as you, right? Research. We talk about it all the time on this show. Better be doing your research if you're an artist. Go to little shows, go to art spaces, right? Not art galleries, but go to the art spaces, those entry market level spaces where you can sell your work. Look at other artists that are kind of similar than you, that have work like yours or just starting out. What are they pricing their work at? How put a dollar value on it in the beginning. You don't know what your audience is yet. Today, there's so many avenues for audience, right? Social media presents a ton of new audiences. Well, that's a completely different audience than an art audience, than an art gallery, than an art collector. That's years down the road. We get down that timeline. We've done some of those things. We've done some group shows. We've sold some pieces to friends and family. We've done studio tours in our city, and the community may come in and buy work. And now we're kind of going, where is my audience fitting? I'm selling a bunch of work. I'm going to try and kind of move that up a little, 10%, 20% here and there. Because what's going to happen is once you graduate from that beginning level into the emerging market, where you get into some galleries or group shows and things, if you are lucky and blessed enough to someday be on a roster or a stable with an art gallery, they may raise your prices altogether. They may tell you, hey, and have a conversation. Why do you price your work here? I think we're going to need to bump your work up because our customer will buy pieces at this price and we feel like your value is at this level. That happened to me. I got into a blue chip gallery in LA and they wanted to raise my prices to fit the level of customer and buyer that they had. And it took me to a new level. They raised them 30%. Which means I raised my prices 30% across the board. All my other galleries, all my other dealers, everywhere, they got the new spreadsheet of the work they had that said, hey, listen, my market value just took a jump 30%. Here's all the new pricing. So I know I'm kind of fast forwarding quite a bit there. But at the end of the day, I found my price points by researching artists who started at the same time as me, who had work like me. I looked at those that were better than me. I looked at those that were at the same level in me. I looked at those whose work was weaker than me, but they were in more galleries. They had more market value. And then I kind of looked at a baseline on how to price my work in between all those things.
Yeah. So what I'm pulling from that, I'm going to stop you there. So what I'm pulling from that is that it's important to acknowledge market value is not consistent with your or any of our opinion on stronger or weaker work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Talk some more about the importance of consistency and having your sort of listed prices be consistent across the board.
Yeah, they need to be consistent. If your goal is to be in the art world and in galleries and things like that, you have to have a consistency. You don't want to have a 60-inch piece that's, let's just say, $4,000 and then have a 30-inch piece that's $6,000 because you like it a lot more, right? Like that's showing something's off here. That doesn't make sense, right? Price should increase with scale. It should decrease with scale. And that's part of the problem too when people price by square inch or square foot or square centimeter, because the lower you go, the price goes really low in scale. The higher in scale, the price really, really increases. So there are things where you have to kind of adjust and kind of maneuver to make sure that consistency isn't so vast in pricing that it really seems comparable as the work goes up 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches, centimeter, whatever. That pricing is slowly going up with that scale. So there's no 100% right answer. They're just, I can't just go, here's the formula, here's the this, because everybody's using something different, and that's fine. But do your research on your level, beginner, emerging, mid-career, wherever you are on the art timeline. Look at the other artists like you. Not if their work is just way better or way worse. Look at where they are in the art world and how they're pricing things and find a good fit.
And so I think we've talked about this before offline, but you round up for smaller pieces and round down for larger pieces. Yeah. Okay. That's important, I think, to share with folks, because, you and I both have works varying from whatever, 2 square feet to 100 square feet. That's important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then talk a little bit about how to navigate, listed prices that might be sold, through a gallery or a dealer versus the studio discount that you might give somebody who does a studio tour that you sell to directly.
Well, yeah, obviously, if you're in a gallery, the standard commission for a gallery is going to be a 50-50% split. That's standard. Now, there are places that I've been in and I'm in where it's 40% or 35% that the gallery takes. And that's fantastic. Yeah, any day, right? It's like the less that you're giving away, the better. But like I've always said, and I said on the first part of our Q&A, is I'm fine with that. They're doing work that I don't have to do. It allows me more time to paint by the gallery working on my behest and selling my work. But, when you're selling work out of your studio, you have the ability to give a discount if you want to. Now, I know artists that don't do that. They sell it for full profit, right? If you have a $5,000 piece that you're going to sell out of your studio, if you sold it in the gallery, you're going to take home $2,500. Sell it in your studio. I know artists that are, this is the value. So that's what I sell it for. I usually, if somebody comes into my studio and is wanting to buy work, I'll usually give them a discount. Usually, 25%, possibly 20%, depending on the work itself. But that's your choice. And that's something you can control, right? That's something that's in your complete control. If you want to give somebody 40% discount who's buying work out of your studio or coming in to see it, I don't know, play. That's where you can experiment with things. Hey, I'm going to do, you buy 2 pieces, I'm going to give you 50% off for buying 2. You buy, you can, that's your control. You can do whatever you want. So, it's really up to the artist on how you do that. But I always, if somebody buys out of my studio, give some type of discount.
Yeah, and this is where I would make a case to William and anybody else that's sort of navigating this. This is where I would definitely make a case for getting some external input, from a trusted source of whatever kind, but to your point from before, doing the research, looking at what else is out there, letting the market tell you, what your current value is. And also understanding too, that's not your value as an artist. That's not the value of your work in a broad sense. It's just what people currently, based on how known you are willing to pay, for it currently. Right. So,
yeah. And it is, I want to rehash this again, even though I already said it. I just want to really buckle down on this. You need to be able to have conviction behind why you price your work the way you do. I've been asked by dealers when I've raised my prices, I've had my dealers say, why are you raising your prices? Like last year it was this, and it seems like it's about a 15% increase. And I sold a lot of work last year, and I got into 2 new galleries, and I got a new dealer in LA, and work is moving, and the value of my work has increased. And what is the response? Oh, wow, great. That's incredible. Thanks for letting us know. You don't want to go, well, because I just think I should make more money. Right?
Yeah.
Or, well, I got to pay rent. I need to afford it. Right? That's not conviction behind your work. You got to have proof in the pudding. You can't just set a price that's X and go, well, it's X because I feel like it's a really strong work of art.
Right.
That doesn't always fly. It's, well, because I just got into 5 group shows this year. I've been selling work out of my studio. Even if it's family and friends, you're selling work. Like, don't diminish who you're selling to. I'm selling work out of my studio. I just sold 5 pieces. I've been selling work on Instagram regularly. Whatever it is, you got to be able to define the why your prices are the way they are and how they're increasing when the art world comes calling, because they will ask questions. Not all, but some. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I'll just add a little bit of perspective from somebody who's much, earlier on the path than you are. I think that it was very helpful for me to sort of see that proof of concept when I started to sell work consistently and realize, oh, there are people who are willing to pay this for my
Yeah.
work. And that allows one to operate from a position of strength. Like the scenario that you just described only happens when you know that if that particular dealer in the scenario that you just kind of laid out decided not to represent you anymore, that you'd still be okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
that your work will sell from the other avenues that you currently have in place. So I think
Yeah.
that's worth sharing as well. But anyway, I'll just kind of wrap this question up by just reiterating, like, ask for help, ask people what their opinion is, ask for people, find mentors in some form or fashion. Back to our last episode of get out in the world and find, people that know more than you, that are willing to sort of be on your team and help out. That's incredibly, incredibly important. Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next question for today. Jen, Jen, how does Jen's last name? Oh,
I believe it's Hassan.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did put me on the spot.
And you're like, I actually don't. All right. Anyway.
No, I mean, I'm a massive fan of Jen's work. Like, I'm a fanboy of Jen's work. I saw her work a few years ago at East Austin Studio Tours, and I did not know Jen's work at that time. And I walked into a gallery on the East Side and I saw her work, and I dropped and went, who is this? How do I get to know this person? Oh my goodness. So that's just some fanboy stuff at how much I admire her work.
And just because we read your question and don't share our thoughts about how much we enjoy your work doesn't mean that we don't. It just means that maybe we forgot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So Jen asks, I'm in this phase of my career where I just want to hide and make art that no one looks at. When should I let people in? I still have shows lined up. Should I just show what I'm known for and keep this experimental stuff to myself? All right. Now, again, as with almost every question that we get, the first part of every answer is it depends, right?
Mm-hmm.
You happen to know a little bit about Jen and kind of where Jen's at in terms of just the trajectory of her art career. So maybe give what context you're aware of before addressing the question, because I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I mean, Jen is emerging. So she has shows, she's in galleries, she has work up on walls, right, consistently. And she's had, a few different styles that she's really worked in that would define her. And I think this is that hard part at times when you start moving work and getting in spaces, is you're constantly creating that work sometimes. And go back to Eric's episode, our last episode with Eric, he talks about this quite a bit. As well. And even when he was in my mentorship program, we were talking about this as well, where he had all these ideas and all this work that he really wanted to start working and developing. And so that's what I told him. Just work on it. Do all the stuff that, you're doing for your shows and your galleries. Keep making that, but find time to make the work that nobody looks at, that nobody sees, because you're going to have to develop it. You want to get to the point, Jen, where you are as confident in that work that you're hiding and not showing people as you are in the work that's gotten you into the art world and into galleries before you put it out there. That's what I would say when you should let people in, is when you're just as confident with that or more confident with it than what you've been making. And then it's time to share it with those other relationships, because everybody knows artists evolve. And I'm deciding in my head if I want to be bold enough to say something else or not. But, here we go. There are galleries that sell a ton of work, that make artists a lot of money. And yes, they're in the art world, but I would consider them outside the art world, because they don't care about the artist's trajectory in the art world. They just care about making money at times. And they do not want anything new from that artist. They just want the thing that's selling. Now, there are galleries like that, and there are galleries that aren't like that. There are galleries that want to grow with the artist and evolve. And, when the artist brings new stuff in, they go through it and talk about it, and they bring it in and do shows. I think Ferrari Gallery is a great example of that in Dallas with Eric. They were willing to grow with him and let him bring new ideas in. But oh man, if I know
Hey,
artists,
before you move on, I actually made a note of that.
Yeah.
And this is back to what we talked about before and in our episode, with Eric. But it's being bold enough to say, this is what you may be aware of what I've done before. This is what I want to show, right?
Yep.
And just being clear about, like, this is what I've got. I think that's really important. So
yeah,
you also have
the
to
key is
once you get it to a point where you're excited, where you feel like it's ready to be shared and you want to put it out there, then it's up to us as the artist to say, all right, here's what I want to show now.
Yeah. I mean, here, it's the same thing with your pricing. You need to have an absolute confidence and conviction behind your work. You can't just go, here's my new work, right? And send it in a PDF in an email.
Yeah.
You need to be confident enough to go, I'm developing. My work is changing. This is where it's going. Let's do something. Let's show it. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean you're going to get a yes from that gallery. Maybe that's the time to start pitching this new work to new galleries and new ideas. You know what I mean? And new places. Like, this is the trajectory of an artist. I'm sorry, everybody. This is how it works. You're going to change. You're going to develop. If you want to make strong work in your lifetime, you're going to have to evolve. You're going to have to develop. You're going to have to change. Ideas are going to grow. You're going to discover new things. Things are going to change and develop and keep moving. You want that trajectory. You don't want to just create the same damn thing every year for the next 40 years. You're going to be so bored and unhappy with yourself. Even if you're making great money, which is very rare for artists to make really great money. That's a small percentage that are very financially successful. But if you're going to create work and survive off of it, man, if you're stuck doing that and what you don't like to do, you know what it's like when you're making work you don't like? Imagine a lifetime of that. Oh, that's awful. So Jen, keep your experimental stuff to you for a while, develop it, work on it till you get that confidence and you have complete conviction in defining what you're doing, and then go like the blazes, man. Throw it out there to everybody. That's what I think. That's my opinion.
Well, I think this goes back to the whole be careful what you become known for. Would you rather succeed at doing something that you may not totally love, or fail at something that you absolutely do, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's also important to note that this should only be a consideration for artists that are already known for something. Like,
yeah, because
you don't know about
you don't know what you're doing yet.
DMs and questions like, hey, should I try this new? And in many cases, it's artists that are not even close to established, that maybe haven't had a chance to show yet, that don't have representation, that are just in. That's great. That's a beautiful place to be. But until you're known for something, this isn't even on the experiment like it's your job.
That's all you should be doing. Yeah, that's all you should be doing.
And share as much or as little bit as you choose to, but that's our responsibility as artists, no matter where we're at, is to keep experimenting. And depending upon if you already have something that you are not, known for, then you can decide how much of that you want to share with other people. But I think that's definitely worth noting.
Yeah, I was telling an artist this last week in my program, and I was saying, listen, experiment, do everything. The more that you're doing that, the faster you get to the moment where it clicks and you go, oh, that's it. That's it. I mean, I've been there playing, trying all these different things, just going nuts. And then all of a sudden it just was right in front of my face and said, hey, I'm here. Let's dance. Right? It just took so much trying and playing. And gosh, I was going back this last weekend. I was going through my Instagram feed all the way back. And I was screenshotting all these things from way back in the beginning when I was posting. And I was like, oh, golly. Yeah, I remember that. So glad I'm not there anymore. But I had to try ink brayers and squeegees. I mean, I was trying everything, and I was just working out how paint works and how texture works and how these mediums work. And it took me, that was, I don't know when that was, 2015 or something. And then all of a sudden, or 2016, then all of a sudden things started to take shape. And all of a sudden I can put my finger on, there it was. There was the moment when all of that shitty experimenting with things that are just sitting in drawers and paper and loose canvas and whatever, paint it over. And it took all that to go, there it is. That's it. That's me. That's where I'm going.
Yes.
But you got to be doing all that other stuff to get there quicker.
You have to experiment recklessly. I think that's what I think about. Like, recklessly experimentation is the fastest path to find your voice and to get to a point where you have that like aha moment of like, oh, I'm onto something. And you know that feeling of like, oh, this is real. This is something that I can see myself digging into and exploring and mining for, years to come. And so I think that no experiment's ever wasted. You and I have joked before about how we both have just stacks upon stacks upon stacks of experiments and work that will never see the light of day. But that was one of the things that I really benefited from. The biggest thing, when people ask me about your mentorship program, not to make this into a commercial, but I'll say it since you wouldn't, like, that is the biggest thing that I gained in being mentored by you, was permission to go out and experiment, like that. Can you imagine? Like, I might still be just putting paint on canvases. Ugh. I'm joking. I'm joking. But so consider this your, listener, consider this your invitation to go and experiment and try new things, because that is the fastest path to get to get from where we're all at one point, which is just doing our best sort of imitation of a combination of our, most impactful influences, to then over time being able to develop into, what will become our own personal voice.
Yeah. And I think, Stacy, our next question is this is a really good bookend here for Jen's question from Stacy Stark. She says, artistically, what are some medium styles and ideas that you would still like to explore that you just haven't had time to do yet, but it's on your list of curiosity?
How much time?
You talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but you didn't really go into it. But you just bought some things to take you to that next experimental level. Like, where are you moving with that? Tell us what you're doing. Don't tell us if you want to keep it
no
like Jen and hide it for a little bit.
No, it's I haven't actually shared any of it yet on the socials, but no. So I have a governing principle, and it's one of the few things that, like, rules for myself that I adhere to, and it goes back to this idea of improv comedy. I think it's the first rule. It's one of the rules of improv comedy is yes and. Mm-hmm. If we're doing improv, on stage, and you say, and we're on Mars. What I'm not going to do is say, no, we're actually on Pluto, because it kills the momentum. So yes, and is when you say we're on Mars, I would say, yes, and we're here to collect all the red dust to make whatever. Okay, we're continuing. So one of the rules I have is that when an idea comes to mind, the shorter the path between what if and why not, the more I can accelerate my progression as an artist. Some things I can try right away because I have collected quite a bit of material and tools and things to play with.
Your mini Anselm Kiefer.
That's right. That's right.
You're like the micro machines, the old toy cars, to age myself a little bit, but you're the micro Anselm with that.
That actually, oh no, I do remember micro machine. I mean, we're not that far apart in age, but I was like, it might actually be a slight, like, half generation difference between you and me. But anyway, sometimes it requires, going out and investing in new tools, new equipment, new material. And so in this case, I've been consumed with the idea of working with metal, and I really debated on, and I've worked with some metal in the past, but not to this degree. I really kind of went back and forth on, like, do I want to learn how to weld or do I want to learn how to cast metal? And I chose option B. So I bought a smelter. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, something that can
smelter
to
melt
heat up.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've got a lot of collected aluminum and copper, and that's my latest obsession, my latest experiment. And so I'm running these experiments concurrently while still working on, pieces and ideas that are, more developed. And I think that
Yeah.
there's something to be said for having a balance there of, it all depends on kind of how you work and what your studio
Yep.
practice is. For me, I have found that I can stray too far into experimental realm, and then I sort of miss out on the fulfillment that comes from developing or working on more developed, ideas and concepts. But anyway, long story short, my list of ideas. I mean, I have said this before. If all I did was execute on a fraction of the ideas that I have in my journal or have in my head, it would still take me multiple lifetimes, to work through it. So the biggest challenge that I have is just like, how do you edit it down? How do I identify, like, all right, cool, this is something fun to play with for a day, and it's an idea that I just feel like it's all about collecting, right? Like, how can I build my collection of ideas and put new things in my toolkit, literally and figuratively? But
Yeah.
how can I figuratively build up my vocabulary, visually to work with? And so I am really driven by, from a medium standpoint, what I encounter, like what I see in the world. My antenna is always up as I'm walking around, driving around, like, ooh, what could I do with that? Specifically with, trash that, shockingly, nobody misses or gets upset about when you pick it up or pull it out of a dumpster or,
Right.
pick it up off the side of the road. And so, yeah, I could go on and on, but that's my latest obsession. What about you, Ty?
I've played with so many things that I don't know what I haven't played with yet, to be honest. And I mean, I started out in clay. I started out in ceramics. I'd like to get back to clay. That's something I've been gradually in my head been moving towards. So I started out in ceramics, started out in clay, sculpture, and then fell in love with painting in art school and kind of never looked back. And I've always maintained doing sculpture, small, and things with my work, or combines that really end up, sculpting on something that is 2-dimensional, taking it 3-dimensional for a wall. But did my first large scale sculpture last year. Ended up in a museum exhibition. And so that was like that first like start of something that I really wanted to explore idea wise, that really took me a long time to get to mentally because of fear. At the end of the day, we all have fear for those things that we really want to do and we haven't done yet. That's what's holding us back. It's never materials. It's fear that's holding us back, because I had these really grand gestures and I have a lot of sketches of sculpture. I never sketch paintings, I just paint. But with sculpture, I'm really sketching ideas, because at the end of the day, you got to engineer these things if you're going to go large. So you kind of need to know where balance needs to be, where weight needs to be. Is it floor? Is it hanging from the ceiling? How are these things going to work with weight if it's not just hanging on a wall? And so I do sketch a lot. And finally, I tried to figure out the least expensive form of sculpture, and that was plaster for me to go large scale. I just did research using plaster for sculpture. What are the best ways to create? This is kind of tying in, I guess, to T, our buddy,
And you
Telfia
failed.
Williams.
You failed in a big way, right? I remember you telling me about how you came back one day and everything had fallen to the floor, right?
Oh, I've done.
But you only
I've had
learned what you needed to learn because you jumped in and freaking did it and made those
absolutely
mistakes to be able to make those adjustments. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'd run to Home Depot and buy a bunch more things to go, how can I structurally keep the weight of this up? Right. And things. And I had to play and experiment. And so I used chicken wire and fencing, and I used wood, and I used the insulation tubes from Home Depot to create a base, and then I ended up creating a 8-foot sculpture that ended up in a museum show that I'm mostly confident in. Not fully confident. There are ideas I like more than the finished work in it at times. And so finding time to do it for artists who aren't full-time in the studio, right, is sometimes something that we really struggle with, because if we have only a certain amount of set time every week to be in the studio, we want to work on those things where we're really feeling led to go in our work we're making. So finding that time to experiment outside of that is a lot more difficult at times. So journal the hell out of those ideas so you don't forget, and maybe just break up some of that time into experimental time to play and do those things, because I'm pretty confident those experiments and ideas will end up developing what you're already working on too, and giving you ideas in the work that you're currently working on.
Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. Don't sit on ideas. Don't. I mean, I'm sure you've gotten a lot of these. People see me experimenting with. Oh, I've thought about maybe trying that at some point. Oh, I've thought a bunch of times. Don't sit on ideas like that. Like Rick Rubin talks about in his book. Don't. That idea came to you for a reason.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
seed.
it's a seed. Don't wait for it. It's not going to grow on its own. And especially the ones that come back. That has kind of become like a
Yeah.
filter for me, is like the ones that I just can't shake. Like this whole idea of casting metal, I just haven't been able to get out of my head. It's come back
Yeah.
so many times. I'm just like, I have to do it. I am compelled to execute on this and just see where it goes. And I might fail gloriously, but it'll unlock another thing. It'll give me another piece of vocabulary that I could apply to something completely different, going forward. I think one of the things that I have observed in myself and others that holds us back from that experimentation is this whole idea of, feeling like we've got to arrive at some level of competency or even, God forbid, mastery before we move on to the next thing. Like there's sort of this like almost like academic progression of like, I've got to graduate from level, the 101
Yeah.
before I get to the 201. And it's like, no, man, this is art. Like we get to make up our own rules. There is no, linear path from A to B to C. And so understanding that in some cases, the barrier for entry to try new things, may be significant, but there's almost always a scaled down, affordable or free version, to try. I don't know if we've discussed this book before. I love it. I highly recommend it. It's a book by Adam Savage, who's one of the guys from Mythbusters. He's got a book called Every Tool's a Hammer. And it's all about like shop organization, tools, like superior ways of kind of the tactics of working with a wide variety of different, materials. But one of the things that I picked up from that book was when it comes to like purchasing new tools or equipment or material, buy the cheapest thing first, just to see if there's something there,
Yeah. Yep.
just to see if you like it. And then once you've worn that thing out or identified like, I want to do more of this, then think about, actually saving up or, investing in a proper, whatever high-end quality version that's going to last you, over time. But I don't know. This is one of my things that I get stuck on, but mastery's for the birds, just pick up more language that you can use in any which way you choose as time goes on.
Well, and let's merge that last question from Stacy into the next one here, because this next question talks about materials as well. And I think this is really good because I know there's some listeners that really do want to hear this from you because of your process and your material hunting, which you're very vocal about sharing on Instagram and even on this podcast. But I know there's a lot of people who follow you in your journey and love the way that you gather and collect things. And so I'm going to pronounce this name the best possible way that I can. And I think it might be Nan von Risen or Risen. And the question is, does your material hunting come from your brain or from your soul?
I was thinking about how to answer this. I think it's Van Risen, and I'm choosing to pronounce it that way because that would make Nan Dutch. So one of my people.
Awesome.
It's definitely not from my brain. Nothing useful comes from my brain apart from like, how to tie my shoes and how to, remember to lock the doors at night. Like if I had to choose one of those two things, it would come from my soul for sure. I think this is one of those things that, again, we don't need to understand why we're doing things. We don't need to have a reason. This does pair well with our previous question. There's no there doesn't have to be a logical, sort of whatever laid out explanation for, why we feel compelled to do the things that we do and chase down the ideas that we have. And so in my case, when it comes to the whole found material thing, it just happened. I did not set out to be somebody who, dealt with trash, but I have always been very resourceful, and I've always been somebody who liked to see what I could do with whatever was available and around. And so it started with just practicality of back to kind of our earlier point of experimenting recklessly. I will tell you, there's a magnificent freedom that comes in experimenting with something that was already either going to be in
Yep.
the trash, or in some cases
Yes.
was already in the trash anyway.
Yeah.
Like, the worst I could do is put this back, where it started. That's a good
Yeah.
place to operate from. So that's kind of like, for me, kind of how I started to work with different things. It started off with, I think the first like sort of found material that I worked with was pallets, because my studio is in an industrial space and there's all types of, industrial waste. And one of the things that I kind of like to try to do is think about renewable resources in the context of, is this something that I could source consistently going forward if I hit on something, right? Like, if I get
Yep.
into a vein where I'm like, oh, I want to do a whole lot more of this, can I get more of this? Or is this a finite resource that I can't necessarily replicate a bunch of, or get my hands on, more of it as time goes on? And so it just kind of happened naturally, to answer the question, and it did come from, I would say, just kind of how I'm wired, which is, what can we do with what we've got, right? And what can be done with things that would otherwise have been discarded. And so that's kind of where, again, we don't need to understand what it's about. And Jerry Saltz talks about this. You don't need to understand what your work's about.
Yeah.
The work will tell us, as time goes on. And so it wasn't until much later that I realized, oh, this is me. Like, this is what I've been doing this entire time, is trying to take the scars, some of which inflicted by life, some of which, self-inflicted, the things that we all have, that we don't, talk about at dinner parties. But that's what this is about for me specifically, through the lens of my experience with recovery and being involved in the recovery community, and seeing human beings, people, lives that were discarded, that were written off, that were, set aside either by themselves or, those around them, and saying, no, this trash can become treasure. What was discarded can lead to discovery. And so now, that's buried, deep in my soul. And when I'm successful, if I'm successful in communicating that on a piece by piece or body of work by body of work basis, hopefully that shines through.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, but I need to send you the pictures just so you can see them. But my senior show in art school, everything was dumpster dive stuff, found objects, computer parts, refrigerators, done on old doors or cabinet doors where my canvases, glass. Everything was made from what I collected in the dumpsters over my senior year, because the university had bought a new area that's called South Campus or North Campus, can't remember, but it was all empty warehouses. And so they had moved a few of the art classes, because they just kind of got the shitty areas, into some of those old warehouses, and it was chain link fences inside that were like separating the classes. But I asked if I could make a studio out there for my senior year, and they said, yeah, absolutely. And I had 24 access to the building to make art. And I used all the pole vaulting pads, because there's a really big track program at the university, and they had all the old pole vaulting pads stored in there. So I made walls with them, and I created a studio but it was next to the IT department. And so that's where the IT department threw all their old stuff in the dumpsters. So I'd collect all these computer pieces and computer parts and stuff, and refrigerators and old TVs that I would stick in the old TVs, and made all these things, highly influenced by Basquiat, who I'd fell in love with that time and took me to painting and those things. But anyways, there's so much about that. And it was all soul hunting. It was that soul. It wasn't like brain, like thinking through, if I got this and this and this could do this. It was like, I wonder what this could do. And there's these moments in there. And I'm the same now with all of my sculptural work, and all of my combines have natural objects within them. So they have wood and branches and things. And I loved climbing trees when I was a kid. And there's something about that, the limb or the branch and all these things that are just soul moments. So I'll see branches on the side of the road, and it's like, I just can't leave it there. That was something alive at one time. It no longer is, but I can make it alive again. I can bring life back to it. There is that soulness to doing that, and searching and finding things. And then sometimes I sit in the studio for years, and then all of a sudden an idea hits, and you look over and there's those things, and it connects to a memory, and all of a sudden it becomes a piece. So there's a lot of beauty in those things for sure.
100%. Yeah. I had this aha moment. You helped me remember just now. I had this aha moment, a couple of months ago, where I realized that, like, the way that I'm creating currently, and I suspect probably indefinitely, is building up a palette of materials, of textures. Not so
Yeah.
much
Yep.
colors. The colors that can inherently be produced by manipulating those materials, or color that was already there. But I just think about, like, I do have those, and part of this is just from like watching those Art 21 videos and seeing
Yeah.
some of these
Oh
just
yeah.
magnificent studios that people have, and just seeing, so when and when you come visit, you'll see, I haven't actually shared this much, but I've got stacks, and I've got bins labeled. I've got
Oh
some of
yeah.
the
I've seen your
funniest
bins.
labels on. Yeah. But now I've got a system where I lay it out like the Museum of like Natural History would have bugs pinned in a
Oh yeah.
variety
Yeah.
of
I know.
different sizes. They're just kind of
Uh-huh.
all like laid out in the glass
Yeah.
cases. So now I've got these white pieces, like yard signs, that I've got everything like laid out like a tray, sorted by size, and I got those anyway. I'm going down a rabbit hole that's probably not interesting to
Yeah.
anybody
You're not
but
the
me.
bug
But
collector. You're the piece and part the piece collector.
but you never.
Yeah.
But to your point, like I actually just placed. I just placed a piece. I placed a piece of material on a piece of artwork that I had been sitting with, and that I had pulled out so many different times. And I finally, when you find a home for it, you're like, oh, this is where you didn't know it, I didn't know it, but this is where
This
you
is where
were
you
meant to be.
belong.
Yeah,
Yep.
for life. So that's a fun question. All right, let's talk about tea.
Yep.
At the Arts of My Thoughts on Instagram, and you've met T, right?
I haven't met in person. Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
No, but I think I know. I think I know T, his sister, and his mom now. So
Very cool. Very
yeah.
cool. I'll let you take first pass at this one. T asks, how do I begin an abstract sculpture? What would I need for the base?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think
Technical
this
question. Yeah.
very technical question, but also I suggest everybody research T Willis, and you'll see his little Instagram handle below us here on screen and in the description. We'll have everybody's Instagram handles in our podcast description, so you can go check out the artist later. But he's just got a wonderful story of overcoming, and I think he would have fit great into the Louise Bourgeois episode, and on a whole different level, on a physical level. So T, just thinking about you, because I've been thinking about this since I saw the question, putting together a sculpture and creating a base and trying to figure this out from a wheelchair. A lot different than me in my studio being able to really move and put these things together and find structure and things. So I think doing some research, but I think having just a piece of wood as a base is a great place to operate. So when you're doing clay and ceramics and maybe you're making a bust, a lot of times you'll have a piece of wood that may have a PVC pipe or a metal pipe that's kind of screwed into the base of the wood. And then having a pipe come up to start building out your structure on, I think is going to create a really simple base for you to be able to maneuver around in 360 degrees, to be able to kind of change angles and change situations to build on and move easily. And so I would say that's a pretty simple base to start with. Easily at Home Depot, get a small piece of plywood cut and then screw in the little PVC ringer at the bottom and then a PVC pipe on top. You can use metal, you can use plastic, whatever you want, but that at least gives you some base. I would say another thing that would be easy is some chicken wire, or fencing that will come in multiple thicknesses and densities to where you can manipulate it and really bend it around and create that flat on something. And then plaster is a really easy place to start. It's messy. You're going to get plaster everywhere because you're dipping it in water and you're smoothing out on the chicken wire. But when I was trying to figure out the best way to start something inexpensively and easy, plaster and chicken wire seemed to be the easiest. Now you can also buy sculpture foam, which is like a really dense and hard foam that's kind of green or blue that you can shave and cut and mold and manipulate. And a lot of that sometimes is used for casting and different things. Wax is another option to create things that you can cast to create molds out of later. But I would say get on YouTube and just start searching beginning sculptures, beginning bases for sculptures. That's what I did. And then I kind of built up a lot of information for me to kind of start on. But I would say, how do I begin an abstract sculpture? You begin. Just like Nathan said in the last one, if you're thinking it it's time to go. It's time to get rolling on it. And I know that T is starting to really add a lot of sculptural elements into his artwork with cloth and different kind of bunched up canvas and things like that. So I know, T, that your mind is moving. It's moving you somewhere. So if it's already going, like Nathan said, if it's moving and you keep coming back to it, which I see in your work, it's time to go ahead and start.
Yeah, he and I messaged not too long ago about joint compound. So just another, version of plaster, essentially. I think, it's funny when we're talking about abstract sculpture too. I think it's important to realize like the chicken or egg relationship between the base and what the base holds can go either direction, right? Like with an abstract piece, we may not know where the base even needs to live or how the weight's going to be distributed until we know, kind of what it's going to be. I would just add to what you said, Ty, like start small and start with what's accessible and nearby, right? Like you can make a sculpture with used bubble gum and a paper clip and start there, and then scale up as you go. A couple of my favorite materials, since you threw some really good suggestions out there, I always forget if it's E3000 or E6000. It's it's an industrial adhesive that you can get at any. They sell it at craft stores, art stores, home improvement stores. Your Lowe's, your Home Depots will have them as well. But it is a bulletproof adhesive that dries overnight and will hold. I mean, it is tremendous. And I've been told by somebody who works in the archival or conservatory space that it is considered to be archival because it lasts
awesome.
freaking
That's
ever.
Good to know.
And it's super affordable as well. The other thing on the wire side, just because I have explored every nook and cranny of Home Depot, the wire that you find in the welding area is super, like a soldering wire, is very bendable.
Yeah, very
more so than your traditional. Yeah, so that's something else that's fairly affordable that you can play with as well. Our next question comes from Daryl. Daryl writes, and I'm going to shorten this. It was a longer question, so I'm going to abbreviate it a little bit. But hi, guys. I understand the importance of routine and showing up in the studio to grow and build a body of work. But when I get discouraged, I lean on a secondary source of income and skip days and even weeks sometimes from the studio. It's a vicious circle, but it also fuels a sort of imposter syndrome because I feel if I don't need to get in the studio, that sort of can't live without it. I have to create art passion. Then, well, perhaps being an artist is not for me. I feel very lucky that I get to paint, but self-doubt and genuine questions about whether it's genuinely as meaningful and enjoyable as it might be perceived by non-artists causes me to question whether it is the most important use of my time. I feel very lucky that I get to paint, but self-doubt and genuine questions about whether it's genuinely as meaningful and enjoyable as it might be perceived by non-artists causes me to question whether it is the most important use of my time. Okay. There's a lot here, Ty. There's a few different veins that we can unpack. I think it's a valuable question for us to kind of explore. There are a couple of parts that stick out to me specifically, and I'm just gonna begin where the question ends, which is question whether it's the most important use of my time. Okay, so that's thing one. There's a practical aspect to that. Another thing that stuck out to me about this question is the consideration of what being an artist might be like or might be perceived like by non-artists. And then there's the whole secondary source of income, which leads me to believe, of course, that there's a financial element to this in terms of looking to art to produce a version of income. So all of these little things that stuck out to me kind of lead me back to, and I guess I'll just focus on one in particular, the whole best use of my time. And I was thinking about this one before we started recording today, and I pulled something off the wall. This has been on my wall for a while there. This is a quote from The Artist's Journey by Stephen Pressfield. This is something that I have had on my wall for years, even before, well before I started art or decided to pursue art full time. And I needed to read this a bunch of times before I took the leap. But it goes like this. I'll just read it. Are you a born writer? Were you put on earth to be a painter, a scientist, an apostle of peace? In the end, the question can only be answered by action. We'll come back to that. Do it or don't do it. It may help to think of it this way. If you were meant to cure cancer or write a symphony or crack cold fusion and you don't do it, you not only hurt yourself, even destroy yourself, you hurt your children, you hurt me, you hurt the planet. You shame the angels who watch over you, and you spite the Almighty who created you, and only you, with your unique gifts, for the sole purpose of nudging the human race 1 millimeter farther along its path back to God.
Yeah.
Creative work is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It's a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution.
Yes.
Give us what you've got.
Yep.
All right. So the reason why this stuck out to me so profoundly when I first read it, and why I feel like it applies directly to this question, is there's I want to call it a compulsion, but that has kind of a negative connotation to it. There's a pull, there's a necessity of, if we have something in us to say that has to get out, then we have to find a way to do something with it. Now, whether that is a side hobby that you set aside and do whenever the Spirit moves you, it could be that.
Yeah.
It could be doing it for all of your waking hours, apart from the handful that you're doing. Right? In the end, the question can only be answered by action. Do it or don't do it. And so, again, not knowing Daryl or where Daryl's coming from or anything other than the question itself, based on what little we know, I would say that if it's not that, like, I have to get this out of me feeling, it may be time to reconsider not whether or not to make art. You should, but your relationship to making art and the role that it plays in your life in particular.
I want to suggest another book to Daryl. You need to read this, Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. I suggest this to everybody, but this is such a great question because I don't want you to struggle with doubt in such a way that it stifles what you may have to give, like Nathan just said. Because so many artists are leaning on a secondary, a third, a fourth source of income to make art. You say you have the importance of routine and showing up in the studio to grow and build your body work. You know that, and you get discouraged. Well, why are you getting discouraged? Let's stop and answer those questions. I can't answer them for you, but what's discouraging to you? Is it the work is not getting where you want it to go? Is it that you're not selling work? Is it that you're having a difficult time getting into galleries, or you can't find the right fit for your work? Like, what is it that is it something that maybe you're really doubting and questioning personally, that's yourself, that's then becoming resistance and affecting your work and your time in the studio? Those are things that obviously Nathan and I can't answer, and we're not going to attempt to answer those. But I think there really needs to be that introspection of, what is it that is discouraging me? What is it that's causing this frustration and this doubt to make me wonder if I should even do this? And I don't know what that is, but maybe it's like finding those other areas of soul care within the secondary income and the studio practice that just feeds that joy outside of those things. So that when you come back into the studio, you have this renewed love and this renewed passion for creating.
So, yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Ty. And I think that it really does, Daryl, you kind of answered your own question in the question. If I don't need to get into the studio, that sort of can't live without it, I have to create art passion, then perhaps being an artist is not for me. Or at least this thought pattern will continue to get in the way of developing.
How much do you love it, Daryl? I think that at the end of the day, those are the questions we need to sit and ask ourselves. Do I love this so much that this is what Rilke says to the young poet. If you're the last person on earth, would you still lay awake at night and say, I must do this? That's an absolute love for it. What are your priorities with it? What are you trying to do? If your sole reason for making art, and I'm just guessing, I'm not saying anything, if your sole reason is just to make a ton of money and live a luxurious lifestyle or something, then probably not in it for the love of art. You have got ulterior focuses here. So I don't know what your focus.
Easier ways to make money.
Yeah.
if you're
Absolutely.
going
A
to be
lot
doing
easier
something
ways
that
to
you're
make money.
not going to love anyway.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know. Maybe you just need to sit there and really ask yourself, like, how much do I love this? And if it's like, I just love making art every now and then, and I love the other job that I do too, then just keep going about it. Keep doing it. Then it's not a big deal. It's fine. It's okay. Like, I think when we start really perceiving how the outside world is viewing what we're doing and how we're living and doing these things is when we start getting in trouble in our heads. So when we start looking outward rather than inward, that's when all those kind of doubt and fear questions really start to creep in. So I don't know, how much do you love it?
Yeah, I think just that's an excellent point. Just taking the time to reconsider what your relationship with art is,
Yeah.
and then aligning whatever actions are necessary with your goals and your purpose around that would be a very valuable use of your time for sure. Next question comes from Samantha. Do you know Samantha? Austin?
I don't think so.
Samantha Lassan. How do I get into the Pooch Cove residency with y'all? Winky emoji.
Winky face.
The broad question, also tips for applying to any residency, how to best prepare mentally, pack for it, use the time while there.
Okay, yes. I know this is a question that probably a lot of you have in your heads. Tips for applying to any artist residency, which there are multiple levels of artist residencies. I'm not going to get into that here. But if you're applying to an artist residency, they're going to ask a lot of questions. So you're going to have to fill out an application form. You're going to have to upload work. They're going to ask for usually your artist bio. They're going to ask for your artist statement. They're going to ask for a statement of work that you're going to create while you're there. What will you be doing when you're at our residency if we accept you? They're also going to ask you, how do you fit into this residency? There's going to be questions where you have to write short 500 character or 1,000 character essays or, things about your work and how you create, how are you going to use your time while you're here? Research the heck out of that residency before you even apply is number one. Are you a good fit for that residency? If you find a residency that looks great, and for the last 3 years, every artist that's been in there is a sculptor and you're a painter, they may not be looking for painters right now. So look at the past residents. I always go onto a residency website. Usually I'm on Artenda, but there's also Trans Artists and Res Artists. Those are 3 great websites to look for residencies. We'll put them in the show notes. But I go through and I look at who are the former residents? Who are the alumni? What work were they creating? Who are they? I also go, and sometimes I'll ask questions. I'll shoot an Instagram message to one of those resident artists that were there prior and go, how was your experience? Did you enjoy it? What did you get out of it? Just to kind of build dialogue under, is this something I want to do? Because usually you're going to have to pay for your flight. You're going to have to pay for your food, and you're probably going to have to pay for your supplies. That's not all residencies, but most residencies will offer you the free board in a studio, but you're going to have to pay for your travel and things. The more competitive residencies that are really difficult to get into will give you a travel stipend and pay for everything else. So those are really tough to get into, but they all have the same application process. So make sure to research, what is this residency about? Do you fit? Look at their mission statement. Look at their vision statement. Do you fit into that? Well, then bring some of that conversation into who you are and why you create work and how you'll be a great fit of the way that they operate and what they are all about within their mission. And then, gosh, pack, it all depends. Is it in France and you're coming from California? Is it in Utah and you're coming from Texas? Well, then you can drive all your stuff out there, right? So you kind of have to think accordingly. Can I order art supplies in the place where I'm going and have them shipped there so that I don't have to bring them with me? I brought a snowboard bag to Canada in my last residency. A number of us did, ski bags full of canvas. And then we ordered paint and had paint shipped to Pooch Cove, the residency we were at. So plenty of different ways to pack. And when you're there, this is my biggest suggestion for anybody that does an artist residency. Don't start working right away. Don't start working the second you get there. Spend some time in that culture, in that community, outdoors in nature. Spend some time soaking this new life, this new space in, because you're going to start working and it's going to change. You're in a new place. You're out of your day-to-day routine. You're away from family or friends. You're away from your city or town that you're always in. You're in a new place. Residencies create new ideas. Be completely open to be patient and take time before your work. That's the best advice I can give you.
So speaking of residencies, let's go ahead and close out today's Q&A episode with a question from somebody who was with you at the last residency, Audrey Cha. Audrey asks, what are your best tips to stay consistent with studio practice when it's only part-time, sharing with another job and kids? I struggle so hard to take time in the studio when everything takes over. Will take literally all advices. I realize I work steadily for a few weeks, then stop like I would at the gym. So hard to go back when I'm out of it for a few days and weeks. You know, I'll go ahead and take first pass at this, at this, Ty. I think that, you know, everything's seasonal. I don't know why that just popped in my mind. That's not the note that I added, but it's just like, but it is like everything in life is seasonal. There are seasons for everything, and things tend to be very cyclical. And so I think that, let's just talk about the kid thing for a moment. I happen to be in a season right now. Our oldest is graduating from high school. So I'm in a season where most of my time working is spent working on the house to get everything ready for her, you know, graduation party. She plays one sport very intensely that just wrapped up, and they had sections, and they made a pretty deep run into the postseason. So there were games almost every day that started at, you know, 1:30, 3:30. Like, it was just a season where that was, you know, gonna be the priority. And so I think that it's important to, for me as a father anyway, for me to acknowledge that in terms of seasons, I have God willing, the rest of my life to make art, but only in my case anyway, a very, very short window to spend with my kids. I suspect yours are younger, but I do think it's important to just like think about the seasonal nature of like, this is a season where this is a priority, or just acknowledging like, I'm not going to have as much studio time as I normally would. I think the other part, I love the gym metaphor, the gym analogy, that last part of like, so hard to go back when I'm out of it for a few days and a few weeks. So I think a lot about streaks when it comes to habits that I want to maintain and develop, whatever they might be, you know, health-wise, nutritional, you know, working out, reading, financial, like all the habits that we know are important, that, you know, very few of which are super fun or enjoyable. How can we string days together where we sort of check the box, right? And so I think one of the best pieces of advice when it comes to physical training and going to the gym is just walk in the door. That is the hardest part, is just starting to work out. Right. So very rare. I mean, I've never walked in the gym and just did one set and left, but I've definitely had a lot of days where I didn't walk in the gym in the first place to get started. Right. And I think the studio is exactly the same way, where, it's especially important. A little trick that I've learned to play on myself is, when my definition for success for a day in the studio is just that I walked in and made one mark, and it could be dink. I made a mark today. You know, I touched a piece today, and I manipulated it in some microscopic way. Like, that counts. And some days that leads to most days for me, that leads to way more than I would have thought. But some days it doesn't. I still give myself the check. I still give myself the little gold star in the grid to say, I showed up today and I did what I could with the time that I had, even if that time is very limited. The last little thing I would throw out there, do you know, does Audrey have a dedicated studio space outside her home?
At the home. In her home. But she has a dedicated space in the house, yes. Perfect. Okay. So I was just going to add, like, with my studio being separate from the house, one thing I found is that if I've got little side experiments and little side projects going on in little corners of the house where I don't have a full, obviously, studio that I have here, so I can always do a little something on the side. You know, even if I can't get into the studio for a full, you know, whatever session. It's very this is such a great question for all artists. But part of the problem sometimes too is when our studio is a home studio inside the house, there isn't a separation between all those other things, right? The job, the kids, the coming home when you're tired, having a mess you need to clean up or keep things in order or straight. Like when all those things blend with the studio, this is a little more difficult for those artists who have the separation of house and studio, where you can go to and leave and come back. And so there was a former mentee from my program a few years ago, same thing in the house. And so I suggested maybe you need to go outside and come back in to go to the studio, because it almost feels like and I read this somewhere, actually, this isn't my idea. This is something I read in a book that said, if your office is at home, before you go to work in the morning, grab your cup of coffee, go outside the door, stand outside for a minute, come back in. So it's giving your brain the idea of leaving and then showing up. That's just a simple idea. May work, may not, but that's something. But it's, gosh, like Nathan said, it's just, when you need rest. When you're so worn out, you need rest, take the rest. Find that soul care moment, like I suggested to somebody earlier. But, sit outside by the pool, sit out in the backyard, read a little bit, get an art book, sit and read a new book, read Ninth Street Women. Find something that just keeps your head studio focused. Even if you can't be in the studio because it just feels kind of grindy at the moment, keep your head studio focused by reading and studying and researching. You're going to find a moment of inspiration where you want to get back. And that's the hard part. The hard part with the gym analogy is when you don't go for a few weeks, you don't go for a few months.
Yep.
Same thing with the studio. You start not going regularly, that regularly becomes a whole lot more regular. And then all of a sudden the doubt gets even stronger. And then you get even further away from the things you're wanting to do. And then that entry back in is so frustrating and so difficult, because that time away has taken some things away that you have to work back to. Just like at the gym, you're away from the gym for 6 months, you're starting from scratch. You're going to be really sore. You're going to be really tired. You may get sick because your immune system gets low. There's all these combinations because you've been away for so long. That happens with art too. We all know we go on vacation, we're gone for a week or 2 weeks. We come back to the studio and we kind of fumble around for a little bit. Go, I don't even know where to start right now. Did I lose it? Do I even still have it? So the best advice, like Nathan said, just walk in the door, just go in. Even if, like we talked about, just sit and look and breathe and meditate for a while if you need to get yourself kind of worked back into that state where you're starting. Just make some marks, throw some paint, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, you're really good at that. That's one of the things I've observed and learned from the way that you sort of manage your time and manage your studio practice. I know with some of the things that have kept you at home, whether they be health or puppy related or, whatever else, like, when we catch up, I'm reading, I'm editing, I'm journaling, right? Like you're doing those things that are still keeping you sort of in the game. But there's so many little, I like the idea of, we kind of have to trick ourselves. Our mind is not our friend. Our brains are not on our team. In most cases, it's telling us all sorts of nasty little stories.
Yeah, resistance. It's tough.
Resistance. And there are a lot of little tricks that we can play on ourselves. I remember working from home, and I would actually take it a step further than walking outside. I would drive to a local coffee shop with my laptop, and that was my, my time to sort of like get set for the day, only to then, drive back and do the office related activities. But there are a lot of different things that we can do to, even if we're not able to physically be making work, to be engaged with it. One of the things little tricks that I played on myself recently is, how can I maximize time when I'm otherwise not doing anything else, and would naturally default to scrolling, on Instagram or doing something else that's not super productive. And so I've started to, I spend a lot of time in the sauna. That's a big part of my recovery, and it does a lot of good things. But in the infrared sauna, which is not as hot, I can have a device in my iPad. I can actually be looking at photos of works in progress and sort of processing almost as if I was sitting with it.
Yeah.
And then journaling. Like I'm known at the place that I go to as the weird guy that's always journaling and writing in the sauna. But that's that's a trick. That's a place where I can do some of the intellectual, the head and the heart work.
Yeah.
To then come back in the studio being like, hell yeah, here we go. Right. I already have momentum before walking in the door because of that time that I've spent with the work and thinking about what's next.
Well, and listen, there are things you can do that are studio centric and not be in the studio. Like all day yesterday, I was on Artsy and I was researching galleries all day. That's all I did for probably 6.5 hours. I was on Artsy. I was going through up and coming contemporary galleries, galleries that focus on painting. I was looking at different cities and areas. Then I was going to that gallery's website. I was looking at their about. I was looking at their space. I was looking at their roster. And then I was researching every one of the artists on their roster. If it had the staff, I was looking up all the staff. I was looking at the work they all like. And then I was adding to my spreadsheet. Is this somebody I should pitch to? Is this somebody I need to go visit? Is this a gallery that I could fit in? And I spent 6.5 hours doing that yesterday. It's tedious, but man, it got me fired up to get back in the studio and make some work because it's just adding to my list. Yeah.
I'm confused. I'm confused, Tyler. Are you telling me that you're going to the art world versus the art world knocking down your door?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
I'm being a smart ass, but
absolutely. No, I get it. But it ties into all this Q&A. That's so many of our questions, right?
Yeah.
How do I get? How do I find? How do I, you know what I mean? It's like, well, you have to get, you have to find, you have to drive it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The art world's searching. They are. Yes, they are. Is the art world looking at Instagram profiles of artists? Yes. They are. They're watching, they're looking. But if you're just sitting around and waiting for somebody to find you on Instagram, probably going to take you a long time to get in the art world. Got to be looking, got to be researching, got to be, I mean, and when I say research, it's not just, I like that gallery. That's cool. No, it's going deep. It's going deep. How long have they been around? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? 10 years, that's an established gallery. That's rare. That is rare. It's a handful of galleries that last a really long time. They're usually 2 to 3 years. It's like a restaurant, right? Restaurant life is really short. New restaurants popping up everywhere. So it's like, how long have they been there? How many staff? It's just 2 people. Well, that's a small gallery. That roster is not going to be very big. It's going to be hard to break into. They have 40 or 50 artists. Well, that's a really big roster. Am I just going to get lost in the shuffle? Or does that mean it's a great fit for me to pitch to? I mean, listen, those are the things we can do. And we're really struggling to get in the studio. Really struggling to get in, make work. Well, then spend a whole day researching galleries. Spend a whole day reaching out to artists you love on Instagram who are at the same level as you and building a network of artists that you can connect to regularly. Yeah. Like these are all great answers to so many of your questions. And we had a number of other questions that kind of fell into the same range as these questions that we answered. So if we didn't read your question, your question probably fit into one of the ones that we read already. And then we just didn't have enough time to really get into everybody's. But this is going to be reoccurring every season. We're going to do some Q&As and answer questions. And so, and Nate, I think Nathan mentioned this last time. We'd love to know some of the context behind some of your questions too. So if you ask a question, maybe say, hey, I'm a beginning artist. I'm just starting out. This is why. Or even like Jen's that we read earlier, I have shows coming up, which she's emerging. So she's not just starting out, but I'm also would like to know about this. Let us know some context, where you are in the art world, where you fit and what your goals are. It really helps us answer even better.
Absolutely. And as we close for today, let's also add that we would love to discuss your thoughts on any previous episodes. We would love to actually, just thinking of this too, Ty, we talked about this before, but I don't think we've asked for our listeners to submit ideas of quotes that we should discuss. You know, Ty and I are just 2 people with our own, perspectives, but would love to hear, suggestions on different quotes that you would love for us to break down or your thoughts or your takeaways on previous episodes where you read a quote or take something new or different to introduce the conversation. Would love to hear your thoughts on those as well. So keep them coming. We would love the comments on the Instagram posts, the DMs. Where are other places where people can message us, Ty? Instagram, obviously, the YouTube comments is a great place.
Spotify, you can if you're
That's
a
right.
Spotify listener. And we'd also love it if you would give us a review. If you would give us a review or rate us on Apple or Spotify, that would be absolutely fantastic because those things help. They help us.
Look at you.
Yeah, I mean, hey.
Look at you doing the thing that somebody wants to grow a podcast would actually remember to do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Love it. Go listen to some Nirvana today, and we'll see you next time.
The National.
Love it. 2 great bands. 2 of my faves, actually. All right.
Bye.
Bye.